All right, I think it's 7 p.m., so we'll get started for this evening. Welcome to the City Commission meeting for Tuesday, June 15th, and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have two proclamations this evening, and I guess we'll begin with the Juneteenth proclamation. And I think we have some committee members from the Juneteenth committee here to come forward to. There's Sonia. Receive the proclamation.
My members. Not shy now.
Don't be shy.
There's the whole crew. I knew there was a group there, so. Yeah, I'm pleased to see that we're gonna be able to do this year. Last year, we lost out, but it's always a great event. I saw on my Facebook page the pictures from 2 years ago with Dave out there and the car wash crew and all that kind of stuff. We had a lot of fun with that, so. So let's start by reading the proclamation, and then you can say a few words.
Okay.
Whereas President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, declaring the slaves in Confederate territory free, paving the way for passing of the 13th Amendment, which formally abolished slavery in the United States of America. Word about the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation was delayed some 2.5 years to June 19, 1865, in reaching authorities and African Americans in the South and Southwestern United States. June 19th has a special meaning to African Americans, and it's called Juneteenth, combining the words June and 19th, and has been celebrated by the African American community for over 150 years. The annual Juneteenth celebration in the city of Manhattan will take place at the Douglas Recreation Complex on Saturday, June 19th, 2021. This year marks the 31st year that the Juneteenth has been celebrated in Manhattan. The theme of this year's Manhattan Juneteenth celebration is United in History and Hope. And after a year of unprecedented challenges, this is an opportunity to come together as a community, regardless of age, color, disability, ethnicity, familial status, gender, national origin, race, religious belief, gender identity, or sexual orientation, to learn about the importance of this historic day. This year's celebration is in memory of Ola Marie Guy, Vanessa Hope, Richard Pitts, and Hannah Slater, and in honor of everyone over the past 31 years who worked diligently and enthusiastically to ensure that Juneteenth is celebrated in our community. Now therefore, Wynn Butler, Mayor of the City of Manhattan, Kansas, does hereby declare June 19th, 2021 as Juneteenth in the City of Manhattan, and urge all citizens to become more aware of the significance of this celebration in African American history and in the heritage of our nation and city.
Okay, thank you. Wait, you want to say a few words?
I will. I want to thank the community, the Manhattan community, for supporting Juneteenth for 31 years. Hopefully there'll be another 31 years that you will continue to do so. But it's becoming a very popular event now, and we have a story to tell, and the story is for everyone. The story impacts everyone, and so we do have a great program this year. We're not quite as large as we have been in the past as far as events go, for the simple reason of COVID. But now that we've waned out of that, we're going to have a good time. We're going to have a safe time. But if you can go to our website, manhattanjuneteenth.org, all of our events, starting with Thursday evening, are listed on there. And we do hope that you'll be able to participate. And if you're not able to come out there physically, please still hit the website. We have a beautiful artwork from several members, 24 members of the community, expressing their feelings with our little logo this year of United in History and Hope. And so we're having an auction at noon on Saturday, and we hope that you all will make some bids on this beautiful art. It is all local. But thank you again, Manhattan and City Commissioners, for allowing us to not only be here, but supporting Manhattan Juneteenth.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna unveil a nice mural down
We
there, right?
are. That's going to be at 10:30 down at the Douglas Activity Center. And the Doug Bird from Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, originally from Wichita, Kansas. He was the one that was awarded the bid, to do it. And so I got to take a peek. It's awesome.
Take the time to come down and look at that, because that's gonna be an interesting piece of
Yes.
artwork.
But that's 10:30 Saturday morning. And we will have free barbecue and burgers too. No beer, but thank you all so very much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Appreciate the hard work, and take the copy of that. I guess I want to read that again. All right, we have a second proclamation. Dean Alfonso, is he here? There you are. Okay, and what this is a proclamation on, the idea of Pollinator Week. And if you're not familiar with that, the idea is butterflies, bees, all that environmental stuff. And I've got milkweed growing all around my garden. Do that on purpose, and it's full of little monarch caterpillars, so they're here, and it's working. And Parks and Rec is taken some of the parkland and turned it into pollinator space, which is great for the environment, but it's also good because it's something less we have to mow. So it's good for the budget too. So I like it both ways coming. So Brenda, if you go ahead and read this proclamation.
Whereas the week of June 21st to the 27th of 2021 is National Pollinator Week. Pollinator species such as honeybees, native bees, birds, bats, and butterflies are essential partners of farmers and ranchers in producing much of our food supply. Pollinator species provide significant environmental benefits that are necessary for maintaining healthy, biodiverse ecosystems. It is critically important to encourage the protection of pollinators, increase the quality and amount of pollinator habitat, reverse pollinator losses, and help restore pollinator populations to healthy levels, and help educate the community on the benefit of pollinators. Now therefore, Win Butler, Mayor of the City of Manhattan, Kansas, does hereby declare June 21st to the 27th as Pollinator Week in the City of Manhattan, and ask the people of Manhattan to join him in recognizing the importance of pollinator species and protecting pollinators and maintaining their habitats to ensure healthy ecosystems and food security.
Okay, excellent. Of course, we've got a lot of folks involved in that. Sunset Zoo, working on pollinator. I think my wife helps out there, works on the butterfly garden. She loves doing that. And the Flint Hills Discovery Center, and of course Parks and Rec, all together. So appreciate everything you do. Want to say a few things?
Thank you, Mayor Butler, for recognizing National Pollinator Week this year. The Parks Division continues to strengthen our partnership, not only within our department with the Sunset Zoo, the Flint Hills Discovery Center, but also with organizations within our community. So we hope to continue working on our Pollinator Pockets program, and we couldn't do that without the support of the City Commission, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, City Administration, and the community. Stephen from the Discovery Center would like to say a few words as well.
So obviously, as Alfonso said, we have pollinator pockets all over the city. And at the Flint Hills Discovery Center where I'm at, we have our own pollinator pocket right downtown with our Prairie Garden Terrace right outside. The flowers are blooming. It's a beautiful spot. I encourage everyone to come out and explore one of the pollinator pockets around town. I promise if you leave the bees alone, they'll leave you alone. So you'll be fine there. So, and then Melissa Kirkwood from Sunset Zoo wanted to say a few words as well.
Thank you, and thank you for having milkweed in your own garden. So at Sunset Zoo, we are really excited to promote Pollinator Week to further our mission of inspiring conservation of the natural world, and nothing does that more than pollinators. And so through the week, we will have lots of activities that we will be doing in person and online through our website and social media, but we will be doing some walking tours at the zoo so you can see what pollinator flowers look like. And we also will be working with community partners like the Extension Office. They'll be coming to the zoo on the weekend to do some education. So we are thankful that we want to be able to educate the community and grow the education of pollinators throughout the community. So we do that a lot with our partners here at Parks and Rec, and we just hope to see it grow and grow and grow. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. I appreciate that effort, and hopefully we can get the bees population up and keep everything going well, and I guess we'll give Parks and Rec a proclamation. Thank you so much. Okay, the next item on the agenda is commissioner comments. And we have Mayor Reddy with us on Zoom. We don't want to forget she's out there, so if we'll start with Commissioner Reddy.
Sure, thank you. Actually, no comments from me this time around. Just I'm glad that Juneteenth is happening this week. Unfortunately, I'll be missing some of the events, but I really do appreciate the mural at Douglas Center and hope to see it soon. Thank you.
Okay,
Mayor? I'll just, I guess, follow up with Parks and Rec, in that it was pretty cool. I had the opportunity to spend the night at the zoo with my daughters on Friday to learn about the 10 variants of frogs in Riley County and the sounds they make. And we listened to the hyenas and the flamingos make noises all night as well. But pretty cool experience, and I'm just excited to see all the kids and families out at the parks doing the programs. Thanks to the Parks and Rec Department. It's a great feeling to have that happening this summer and to be part of that. So that's all I got.
Mayor, I just wanted to remind everybody that the Arts in the Park program on Friday nights at 8 o'clock at the Norval Band Shell is up and going. You got the Juneteenth concert this Friday, and then after that we've got classic rock, we've got a comedian, magician, and a few other bands before they get to the Kansas City Improv Company to close out the season the end of July. So every Friday night, 8 o'clock at the Band Shell, and every Tuesday night we've got the municipal band concerts at either 7:30 or 6:30 the 4th of July. So come on down.
Linda Morse, after this meeting, or before, when you get through with your item, the municipal band is across the street, and they are good. It's worth attending. I am really pleased with the Juneteenth lineup, and so there are events on June 17, which is, must be Friday and Saturday, because 18th, and anyway, 17th is, the Kansas City Monarchs speaker is on Thursday night, and Friday is the Arts in the Park with Juneteenth themed performances, and then on Saturday it's like 8 in the morning until 2 o'clock at Douglas Center and the City Park. I was part of the Juneteenth committee for over 20 years. It's kind of like after I joined the City Commission, I couldn't do it anymore, so I had to give it up. But I'm really pleased with that this effort continues, and it's an important for our community to have these events and cause us to think and self-examine. So I think that's all. Thanks.
I just want to thank everybody who participated in Flag Day yesterday. We put new flags up at City Hall, so we got some nice crisp ones there. They get replaced every year on Flag Day, which is a great tradition, and the Boy Scouts raise the flags up, so we'll do it again next year. Last year we missed out on it because of the pandemic, so hopefully we're getting everything back on track, which is good news. So the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Now, items on the consent agenda are those of a routine and housekeeping nature, or those items which have previously been reviewed by the City Commission. Now, we can take public comments on any item on the consent agenda. Okay, I don't see anyone wishing to speak on the consent agenda, and no one signed up in advance, so we'll close public comments. Are there any commissioner comments?
Mayor, I'd just like to talk about item D, which is the Museum of Art and Light. We got approval from the state to add that to the program, our Star Bond program, and I just think this is gonna be the coolest thing ever. And of all the interesting things that might bring people to town, I think this is gonna be a good one. And so I'm looking forward to it's gonna be a process, it's gonna take a while, there's hurdles to get through, but I'm completely in favor of it and like to see it moving forward.
I too am enthusiastic about it. When the Country Stampede left, one of the things we asked the Chamber of Commerce to do was gather a group together and brainstorm for what can we do to make up for the loss of that. And I'm sure it's going to take a number of smaller events. The odds are we'll never do something that big. But this is, whether it was the Aggieville reunion or whether it's this event, this bringing people here is what we need to be about to make our community vibrant. So I think it's a great idea. I'm anxious still to see more of the details, but I certainly think it's a good idea. And the Star Bonds are, good grief, half of it. So how often does somebody come to you and say, we have a gift for you? And that's how I feel about the Museum of Art and Light. Thank you.
Commissioner Reddy, do you have any comments? Okay, I'm seeing shaking her head no, so we're good. I just want to, highlight also the Museum Art and Light. Of course, where we're at now is the Secretary of Commerce approved the Star Bonds. So now it's the pre-development phase, and that's going to be interesting, and that'll come back to the commission. We'll see how all that shakes out. And I think in the long run, if the projections are correct, as Commissioner Hattasol said, this will probably turn out to be a pretty good thing. And then item G on the consent agenda is the Kidscape project, and we'll have a little presentation on that here shortly. And that's going to be an interesting change to the Discovery Center and maybe pump up attendance down there. So I think that's a great project. So if there's no other comments, we can entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda as it was distributed.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. City Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Mayor Butler,
Yes.
Commissioner Morse,
Yes.
Commissioner Hattasol,
Yes?
Commissioner Estabrook,
Yes.
Commissioner Reddy.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is a presentation, and I believe Kent Glasscock was going to handle that if he's here. There you are. Didn't see you. And others. Yeah, the Flint Hills Discovery Center Foundation Board. And Leslie White is supposed to be here also.
She is.
There you are.
Yes, here. Thank
So
you.
we've got the whole crew. You take it from there, Kent.
We do indeed. Thank you so much for the action that you took on the Kidscape project this evening. Leslie and I are here on behalf of the Flint Hills Discovery Center Foundation Board. And we embarked on fundraising for the Kidscape project over a year ago. We had a couple of hiccups with the pandemic, kind of slowed things down, but we have raised over half of the $1.3 million in pledges for that project. So we're in good shape, and the fundraising continues at a brisk pace. We want to thank you for all that you have done over the course of the many years for the Flint Hills Discovery Center. It is an outstanding, wonderful asset for this community, and it helps to anchor a part of downtown redevelopment that is now going to be enhanced by the Art and Light Museum, and we couldn't be more thrilled. So, Mr. Mayor, on behalf of the Foundation Board, in recognition of the action you took for approving Phase 1 design of our Kidscape project, $1.3 million, we would like to present to you with this humongous, garish check for the full cost of the $62,000 some odd dollars for Phase 1.
We need full photos of all the people here, don't we, Leslie?
Yes, Susan's here, Joe Carpenter, and Chris.
Uh-huh. If you'd come forward, if you're part of the board or those here for the Flint Hills Discovery Center. Yeah, absolutely. No, they have a newsletter too.
Kidscape? There we go.
Right, the next item on the agenda is a public hearing to consider issuing industrial revenue bonds for Meadowlark Hills. And Jason Hilgers, Deputy City Manager, and Chris Nelson, Financial Service Director, Meadowlark Hills, will do a short presentation.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. Let me share the screen here so the audience and our participants can see. So this is an industrial revenue bond issuance that's before you this evening. So 3 action items. There's obviously the hearing, which we're a part of. There's a resolution of intent to issue up to $50 million, and then there's first reading of the ordinance this evening. Gilmore and Bell is also available via Zoom. Bill Burns is available for comment, and you did mention Chris Nelson with Meadowlark as well. This is one of the better explanations for the source and use of funds that we've received on IRBs in the past. So I think we should just go right there. So it's an explanation on the issuance that you're contemplating this evening, and then the use of those funds. It's multifaceted. There are many years associated with Meadowlark and the use of IRBs. It is not directly related to any type of property tax exemption or sales tax exemption, but they have used this tool for a number of years. This evening is an opportunity to issue up to $50 million to accomplish that series of uses of funds that you see on the screen. At this point, if Bill and Chris want to talk more about it, or if you have questions of them, but it's a pretty straightforward issuance for the city. We traditionally do these for companies that approach us. We did receive another application from Meadowlark. But at this time, I would stand for any questions if you have any of city staff, but I also know, again, Bill and Chris are available too.
Just one point, just to be sure everyone listening out there understands, there's no city liability here. We're not spending $50 million. We're just facilitating the issue of the bonds, which is going to help Meadowlark out. It's not going to increase the city debt or cause any financial issues for the city.
Correct.
Okay, are there any questions from the commission?
Great.
Just to say that I think, I've been on the commission now about 6 years or close to it. And this is like the 3rd time, I think, that Meadowlark has come with an IRB request. And Jason assures us that those have worked out well and there have been no issues. So I think that it's the kind of support that we can lend to this organization. They're a nonprofit, so.
Yeah, this tool is embedded in the state statute, gives municipalities the authority to do it. As the mayor mentioned, there's no financial liability, no ownership. Their unique structure between the owner that's of record and the lease that is put into place. We have our name on property all across this community that have leveraged IRBs. It's very confusing to the public. It's very confusing to most, but it is the way the statute is written, and we're obviously following that. And it's the ability for companies like Meadowlark and many others to leverage this tool, and it's a unique way for them to pursue with their financing.
Okay, Commissioner Reddy, do you have any comments? We don't want to forget folks out online there.
No, I think this is one of those that we've had good history with it, and like you said, I don't see this as a problem. I do support this.
Okay, so we need to conduct a public hearing, so the public hearing period is now open. If there's anyone that would like to speak on this item, you can please come forward. Okay, no one signed up in advance, and it doesn't look like anyone is going to speak tonight, so we'll close the public hearing portion. And are there any other commissioner comments? Okay, seeing none, we can entertain a motion then.
Mayor, I move that we approve resolution number 06-1521A, indicating the commission's intent to issue and first reading of an ordinance issuing not to exceed $50 million in industrial revenue bonds to fund the 2021 Series IRBs, and approve certain documents and actions in connection with the issuance for the purpose of refunding the outstanding IRBs issued by the city for Meadowlark Hills, refinance other obligations of Meadowlark Hills, and finance capital improvements on the Meadowlark Hills campus.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. City Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Morse?
Yes.
Commissioner Hedisel?
Yes.
Commissioner Estabrook?
Yes.
Commissioner Reddy?
Yes.
Mayor Butler?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, we'll move on to the general agenda. We have 2 items for discussion. We will not be voting on these tonight. And the first discussion item is the Public Art Program Policy Discussion. And the presenters are Dennis Marstell and Randy Clifford and Katie Jackson.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Let me get the share screen so Commissioner Reddy can see our presentation tonight. And others on Zoom. Great, I'm Dennis Marstall, Assistant City Manager, and tonight, as you said, I'll be joined by City Attorney Katie Jackson and our Director of Recreation for the Parks and Recreation Department, Randy Clifford. We come before you tonight with a discussion item about the creation of a framework for the development of a public arts program. Part of this framework was initially identified by the Arts and Humanities Advisory Board back in March. And over the past year, the Greater Manhattan Community Foundation and some of their key donors have targeted the arts as part of their philanthropic giving and raising the opportunity really for us to have an expanded conversation tonight about going forward. Specifically, the Community Foundation is interested in partnering with the city to donate and commission art on an annual basis, which continues their past support of different arts programs in the community. So when you take into concept of foundation support, you also look at what we've done recently with a juried art program through the city work in 2020 and that of the Arts and Humanities Advisory Board. You also see some private support for mural work across the community from a group called Insight MHK, and then what you've heard tonight about some of the support for the Art and Light Museum. You really see a lot of energy in our community around building art and supporting art in general, but specific, there's more of this conversation about what is the city's role in using the public rights of way and how do we want to promote the arts. And so as we begin our presentation tonight, we really wanted to highlight for you kind of that framework or the components, especially the policy decisions of what forms a public arts program. Plus, we also want to share some examples of some other communities who have undertaken a public arts program, and then we will conclude tonight with some of the resources that we've identified for a public arts program. And so I'll turn the presentation now over to Katie Jackson, our city attorney.
Good evening. I'm speaking on our past experiences with public art projects. We've done a variety of them at the city. I'm not the only one who's had these experiences. The Director of Parks and Recreation, Eddie Eastis, is here, and we've had other staff who've had involvement in them. My experience goes back to the Discovery Center, our initial permanent and temporary exhibits, and the construction of the Discovery Center, and the roundabout structure, the juried art the recent juried art show and more, and I'm only bringing those up because we're going to talk about each of those things and what types of projects they are and what they have involved for the city. Tonight, when we talk about public art, we're talking about artwork that can be enjoyed by the public. So it's located in a public space. It can come in all forms. So what you've seen around the city, of course, with the juried art is sculptures, but of course it could be murals and all kinds of other forms of art. Just for everyone's clarification tonight, when we talk about public art, we're actually talking about art that's going to be located on city property. Some people use the term public art more broadly to include art that's on private property, but that the public can enjoy. Tonight, when we use public art, we're really just talking about city property. And we have some examples throughout the presentation of Kansas and other areas' public art program projects. So I talked a little bit about some of the past projects that we've done. I'm characterizing all of these in our experience as ad hoc, and that means we did the projects as they came to us. We developed the policy, the process, the documents for that individual project. So we have conducted public art projects in the past with private partnerships that we did not have any public art policies in place. So that approach can exist. However, as Dennis highlighted, as you get more energy and more interest in art projects in your community, which are a great asset to the community, there is a best practice and a need for some policies that help create consistency for all the people or all the different entities that might want to engage with the city for public art. So I'm calling this the ad hoc because you can think of projects that the city of Manhattan has done with private partnerships, with city staff, without policies, and those things have taken several forms. So what we've been asked recently with the Greater Community Manhattan Foundation's opportunity is to consider policies that would provide a consistent set of policies and procedures for art projects. So if we adopt those policies as a city, what the commission really needs to understand in the public is that now this is open to all comers. It's not just an ad hoc project when we have a single opportunity. It's any group or any artist that would like to partner with the city. That could be a very exciting outcome for the city, but that could mean that we're talking about not just 1 or 2 projects a year, but it could be many more. It could also mean that the city is wading through a variety of proposals and deciding which that would most like to focus on. So the types of public art projects, and these are ones that we've done in the city already, some are kind of fall in these 3 large categories. And of course, there's all kinds of variations, but someone might actually come to the city to donate the artwork. So the art is done, they want to give us the piece of art. That is one way in which a city can acquire art. The second is that the city will commission or purchase the art. That purchase might be with private funds. So it might be that we have grant funds or someone donates funds, but then we as the city go out and we select that piece of art, we purchase it, or we hire someone and we commission them to produce that art for the city. And then the last type of project in these large categories are loaned to the city. And that's like our temporary sculpture collection, our juried art downtown, where artists lend us their work on a temporary basis, and we display it for the public. So those are kind of the 3 big categories, but they all have a variety of steps that are that we do on the city staff side that require dedication of resources and staff. So there's really a lot that's involved with public art. The commission is very familiar with a public infrastructure process and the way that it involves design and construction, and that you have, from a design, you have a RFP, you might be doing a bid after the design phase to get your contractors and all of those things. You can think of art as kind of a variation of a public infrastructure project. Obviously, some art projects are going to be very small public infrastructure, right? Like putting a bench in a park. It's going to be very small. It's not going to have a big impact. Some public art projects are going to be much larger, where there are a lot of facets to how that art is installed and then maintained in its location. So these are some of the steps that we as the city have gone through in these past projects. When we are approached with an opportunity, there's obviously internal discussion about when that can occur, where that can occur, and all of those things. We have to figure out where art can be located, and that's a lot more complicated than it might seem in some cases. because we have to evaluate safety and site restrictions, especially if it's located along in the public rights of way. We have to evaluate like the load of wherever it's located, if there would be issues with weather or wind or those things, and we have to try to determine what type of art can be located there so that we can maintain that safety. As I said, if we are commissioning or purchasing the art, then we have a procurement process to go through. You, as the commission, have been through that recently with the Douglas Center mural. We put out an RFP. We had a selection process where an artist was chosen and recommended to the commission for a contract. That's very similar to any kind of public infrastructure project you might have experienced in the past. As city staff, we facilitate the selection committees that involve city boards sometimes, depending on the location, and of course, presentation to the city commission. We might also be working with our private partners and within the community. There can be design with art, and there obviously then, once we've selected an artist or we know what the project's going to entail, we have contracts, and then we have the process of installation on city property, supervision, and then post-art, we have other things. We have payment, we have grant compliance, we have documentation, insurance, and all kinds of things. And these are steps that we have done and we continue to do with our art. I spoke with Eddie earlier today, and if you want more detail, he could tell you more about the staff impacts from our juried art project in terms of the impacts on Public Works and Parks and Rec staff in order to install those in the city rights of way. And it does take time. That we just want everyone to understand is part of what we have to absorb when we have these projects. I talked a little bit about this, but artwork is an asset. We do consider it an asset in our city financial position, but it has to be inventoried, insured, managed, and maintained. So we don't have a large art collection now, but we do have art that we have maintained. As we know, the Johnny Caw project was a great project. That was a public-private partnership that helped give Johnny a fresh look and a way for the public to enjoy him a little more. But that project took almost 2 years. It took a long time for the city to go through that process because of the complexities of doing a large project on public property. So after the art installation, it's just important for everyone to remember that our duty as the city doesn't stop when the art's installed. We have to continue we insure it, we have to ensure that it's maintained, that it's repaired, that it's secure if that's relevant to the art. We have to observe it for any damage or destruction. And then there's deaccessioning, which is a kind of a catch-all word for what you do when you want to remove the art, you want to sell it, donate, or whatever you want to do with the art after you're intending to remove it from its location. So I'm not going to go into all the different issues that we have to be mindful of as we go through these processes, but there are issues that we are working into our processes. The First Amendment issue is in terms of the selection and what is art and if you're censoring and all of those things, but we have to be sure that we are working with the artist on the intellectual property rights that are associated with arts, the Federal Visual Artists' Rights Act issues, ownership issues. If art is donated, that we're sure that we have clear, title to it, we understand what our rights are. Our insurance valuation, that's an issue that we deal with temporary exhibits, that we have valued the object that we're insuring during the time that it's in our possession. And then we have ongoing, if we were to have to modify, maintain, or repair artwork, we have to be mindful that we're being respectful of the artistic integrity of the piece. So I'm providing an overall, kind of an overarching background of the projects that we have implemented in the past. I just want to highlight that, these are staff intensive, and it's not, art is something that in my experience, city administration embraces. It adds incredible value to the community, but it's just important to understand that if we get funding for art and that funding is going to the artist or it's going to the supplies, the city is not typically receiving any of that money. We're absorbing our costs, and our costs could be all the staff time associated with implementing that project and any kinds of materials that we might be responsible for the installation, care, and maintenance of the artwork. So the projects, in my experience, have involved the city manager's office, our office, Parks and Rec, Public Works, and Risk. So you have a wide variety of staff involved. And it takes time. One of these projects, a more sizable project, it takes staff time. And if we were to do more of these, or we were to adopt a policy that allowed any comer to propose art projects, then we have the, now we're in the maybe enviable position of choosing between art opportunities. We have an engaged art community, but we'll have to select what we can do and when and prioritize. So we can't assume that if we have a policy that we're only dealing with one opportunity, we might have multiple opportunities that we're immediately balancing, or at least balancing in the near term. So if we were to adopt policies, and as we acquire more art and we absorb the responsibility for those projects, the program would be growing, and so would the need for additional staff resources to appropriately manage the program. So I want to, before I turn it over, and I'm going to turn it over to Randy Clifford, and he's going to tell you more about other cities, but I wanted to let you know that when we're talking about art policies, the kinds of policies we're talking about, the first 3 bullets here relate back to the type of project. So a lot of cities have a donated art proposal policy. So if someone wants to donate art or funds for art, you fill out a form and you go through a defined process. That process, we provided you with some examples. It's lengthy. It covers a lot of the things that I've highlighted that we've worked with in the past. But it is a process that you have to go through. And when we say policy, just bear in mind that we're not talking about just the policy that comes before the commission for adoption. It's all the documentation that the city would have to develop to support that policy. So if we do have some kind of donated art program, for example, we'd have to have an application form, we'd have to have instructions. If we're going to commission art, we have to adapt our RFP forms for that. And of course, we always end up with contracts and communication with the artists after the fact. So just that's all part of what we're talking about when we say a policy. It's really everything that would go to support and implement a program. The last thing I want to talk about, which isn't something that we're asking for specific commission input on tonight, but it's something that in the past the City Commission and our Arts and Humanities Advisory Board has talked about, and that's percent for public art. Percent for public art in the most general terms means that you dedicate a certain percentage of capital improvement project costs for public art. I'm only bringing this up because something that to consider as you take a view of adopting arts policies or creating an arts program is that other cities in Kansas fund their public arts programs and their efforts through percent for public art. And I've provided in the memo, and we can go over it if you want, but a lot of the cities actually have budget line items or specific funds for art, and that's how they support the staff efforts and then the ongoing responsibilities for arts. That's something that if the City Commission wanted to proceed with more of a robust public art program, that we would want the commission to talk about and consider down the road, because that is a common source of funding for public arts programs, not only in Kansas, but throughout the United States. So at that, if there aren't any questions for me right now, I'll turn it over to Randy, and he's going to talk about how some other communities have implemented similar programs.
Thank you, Katie, and good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I wanted to just touch on 3 sample programs that we can, I think, highlight some areas that you'll see some common elements, but also you'll see that every community does things a little bit differently, and there's not necessarily only one path to get to where you want to be with a public art program, but I think there are going to be some things that you can kind of pull out a little bit. And I think I'll start out by talking a little bit about our neighbors to the west in Salina. They have, and you may be familiar with, they have a very well-developed public art program, been in place for many years, well over 20 years. They actually have gone through a number of activities and exercises to really develop a pretty robust program. And back in 2007, 2008, they developed a cultural assessment and strategic plan. So they actually brought someone in to do a creative vision for their community to develop, again, a very comprehensive plan that allowed them to build on some of the things they already were doing in the community. But I thought there were some really important goals that I wanted to mention to you that came out of that exercise. And I think some things we can think about a little bit as we talk about where we go in Manhattan. Specifically, they wanted to make arts, culture, and heritage offerings welcoming, affordable, and accessible to all citizens. Make their community a more beautiful place to live, work, and visit. Use the arts, culture, and heritage as an engine to drive economic development and downtown and community revitalization. Make Salina a model community for cultural sector coordination, unity, and support. And guide Salina's cultural development with enthusiasm, skill, excitement, and vigor. Again, they have a well-developed department. There's a separate department within the city organization and has funding for a number of staff positions, and they do a lot of different activities, both from a programming and event basis as well. But I think where I wanted to hone in a little bit on what they do there with community art and design, I think might be something that's relevant to what we're talking about here tonight a little bit. Salina's community art and design program has been in place since 2000, and they actually refined some specific policies in 2006 and adopted those to facilitate the inclusion of artists and the art and design projects in many of their city projects. And at the same time, they put a community and art design committee in place too. So they really work in 3 different areas with this art design process. They work with their capital improvement projects, and so these represent significant art and design projects connected to major capital improvements, and they're identified by the Community Art and Design Committee, city staff, or the commission, or community input. So that's something they attach a lot of their major infrastructure and capital projects. They also have a program called Art in Public Places, and that's where they have many works of art throughout Salina. Some are provided through gifts, others are commissioned for specific locations or specific projects, and they're all part of a permanent collection. They're located on public property. And then finally, the other important component, I think, what they have in Salina is what they call resource partnerships. And so they also work to provide resource assistance in the individuals, organizations, and businesses in the development of art and design projects. And an important part of that is to encourage private projects which enhance the beauty of the community. And that can include private business locations, schools, churches, or other public locations that are privately owned, be visible to the public. So those are some highlights of what they are doing with the Salina program. Again, there would be a great resource for us in terms of having people that would be willing to work with us in developing some of the components we might be interested in here. A little different example would be looking at the city of Olathe. As part of several years ago, as part of a Parks and Recreation master plan, they also called for the creation of a master plan for public art. So it was kind of rolled into the overall master plan for the department. And they went out and put together a package to bring a consultant in and work on that master plan specifically for public art. And so they determined a number of guidelines or things they wanted to put in place. Number one, they should establish a City of Olathe public art program by ordinance. It should help build the overall identity of the city and activate public spaces to connect people to the community. And it will be funded through a variety of mechanisms, general fund, percent for art, grants, and private fundraising. And they also had a council-appointed public art committee. And in their situation, they had a public art program, a staff person that was connected with the Parks and Recreation Department, but was designated solely for the role of arts program coordinator. So someone who's going to work with all these projects in their community. And so they had about 5 different goals of what they were trying to accomplish with that program. Develop public art projects as part of community parks, trails, and facilities. Commission public art as part of the select transportation infrastructure capital projects. Execute 2 or 3 high-impact projects. Refine a downtown outdoor sculpture exhibition, which they'd already had one in place. They wanted to kind of expand and refine that program further. And then also kick off some projects that featured community stories, and they wanted to illuminate aspects of their unique cultural and history, and talk about and be able to tell stories about that with some different types of displays. So those are some of the components of what they have put in place with the program in Olathe. And I think it's, again, a little different approach than what they're doing in Salina, but they're working towards some of the same goals. The City of Golden, Colorado has an Arts in Public Places program. And they have done that just to try to really involve artists in bringing that perspective to the design development process in the community. They want to provide an aesthetic balance to capital improvement projects and try to create memorable spaces that also support cultural tourism and economic development. So trying to tie all those things together. They established an ordinance that both provided some funding mechanisms and also created a public art commission. And in their particular program, they developed an Arts in Public Places reserve account. And so they will cause an amount equal to 1% of the construction cost of any construction project that's equal to or greater than $50,000 to be deposited into that public places reserve account. So they're really identifying, really most any type of project of any size of all, and dedicating some funds for that that particular account, not necessarily using those funds for every single one of those projects, but they're building a fund through making that designation. They have an alternate level means of funding in which they can actually, if they choose to annually adopt funds in the capital improvement program, they can also use a fixed amount of funding that they provide through that tool as well. So they put a lot of emphasis on site integrated public art, and they have a very well-defined public art selection criteria that they follow, and have all that laid out in the program, and have, again, pretty well-defined process for the approval and display of public art and the site selection. So they work with a public art commission that has a little bit more authority perhaps than just an advisory board would, and they have a staff liaison that works with that public art commission. So you've seen maybe 3 different examples there of how some programs could be organized, but there are, again, as I mentioned earlier, I believe there are some common elements there, and they have good resources for us in terms of looking at how we might move forward with developing some of our policies here. I think we certainly should take advantage of some of the resources that are out there. So with that, I'll turn it back to Dennis.
Thank you, Randy. As we wind out our presentation tonight, we hope to have provided the framework of what a public arts program can look like in Manhattan, but also give you a better understanding of the complexity and attention it will take to bring this program to life and to have a robust program. I know many in the community are focused on the development of an art donation policy, which is one component which we outlined tonight, and the policy development is just the first step. The implementation of the policy is the crux of the program. So yes, receiving money to support art sounds like an easy and can be the first step, but it will fall short and cause frustration if we don't have the resources for implementation. City administration, as we highlight, does not see this as an ad hoc or a limited time venture going forward, but rather this is a program that will need enhanced support and attention to deliver on the community's aspirations for the program. As we noted, there are city resources from insurance and significant staff time needed to manage a public arts program. If you do choose to go forward, we suggest that the only way we can implement the program is with additional staff. Last week at our budget workshop, you heard from department heads talking about their struggles to deliver the services you expect with the staff and budget that they have. Recognizing this, that we are suggesting that if you want to move forward with a public arts program, we need to have one additional staff member to implement the program and policies that we will need to contain within that program to move forward. We believe we can initially run the program with one new staff member with the working title of Public Arts Program Coordinator. But realizing, as we highlighted earlier, that there will still be resources needed from the city manager's office, city attorney's office, Public Works, Parks and Recreation, and then of course part of this will involve coordination of some of the public advisory boards. We have identified a hiring range and salary for the position, and we'd look to incorporate the position as we also consider the other staffing requests for the 2022 budget. One advantage is that if you do want to move forward with the creation of the public arts program and support the staff identified for the implementation of the program, it would give us some time to determine if there is some private support among the arts donors who would consider endowing the position or somehow support this position, potentially both with public and private funds. As Katie mentioned, if you want to consider a percent per art program, that could be a funding source as well, depending on how extensive you want to create this program. While that would be a strong public-private partnership opportunity, we can't plan on that without having full knowledge of what might be available. Our commitment is that it would take at least 100% of city funding for the position as we head down this road. So to conclude, we believe we have a strong framework for a public arts program, and we have a community that's very eager to support a public arts program. And so we would like to take this opportunity to gather your input and understanding of how you want to proceed on this topic going forward. So Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
Should we do public comment first, maybe? Let's take public comment before the commission discusses. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on this topic? And please remember to state your name and address for the city clerk. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Jackie Hartman Bork. I live at 1412 Penrose Place here in Manhattan. I grew up in Manhattan, and then I moved to Fort Collins, Colorado, and did a lot of work with the communities on the Front Range, Fort Collins, Loveland, Longmont. And I had the best of both worlds, I thought, because I came from Manhattan and I had the small Midwestern culture background, of which I continued to visit 7 or 8 times a year, but I lived in an area that was growing and expanding their horizons, their citizens, and so again, I had the best of both worlds. When I had the opportunity to return to Manhattan, I was really pleased with what had been going on since I had moved away. The MAC, the Beach Museum, all kinds of things were happening and they were all good. And at the same time, I joined the Chamber of Commerce, sat on their board, and went on the inner city visits with many of you. The first inner city visit that we went on was to Columbia, Missouri. And a part of that visit was a discussion on public health. You might remember that we talked about how they worked with the community and education worked together to use the schools for sporting events and recreation, much like we're doing now. So was pleased to hear that that was very successful and that we could do that from taking that trip, that aspirational trip. Again, arts was part of that. Arts was part of the trip that we took to Fayetteville, Arkansas. It was part of the trip that we took to Omaha, Nebraska. Everybody on the trip came away saying that public art was one of their priorities. So it was very similar to what our aspirational committees were doing. When I retired from K-State, I was fortunate enough to join the Greater Manhattan Community Foundation Board, and I chair their arts committee. So we've been spending a lot of time talking about the funds that we have available, which is usually the big problem, is who has the funds, and Mrs. Baker said it well earlier, that usually that's what you have to deal with, is trying to raise those funds. We have the funds available in the Lincoln and Dorothy Deal Fund for public art. And so on an annual basis, there can be grants to apply for some of those funds to support the projects that the Arts and Humanity Committee has been working on, and the murals that you're seeing pop up in town that Insight MHK has been working on. We want to continue that. The problem is the ad hoc nature that Katie was talking about that we have to go through. So we're in support of a public policy, much like the one that was addressed tonight, so that we can enhance our community, attract people, tourism, and those that want to stay here once they graduate from K-State, which has been a problem of ours for a long time, and also to attract those to move to Manhattan. And public art is just one piece of quality of life that will help us do that. So I see no downsides, only upsides. It does need to be organized. There's lots of partners that want to be involved. And so, as we all know, the more people you have interested in a project, the coordination is key. So that's why I would urge you to consider the proposal that was presented tonight to you. Thank you.
Jackie, could you sign in, please?
Sign in.
Sign in, please.
Yep.
Okay, is there anyone else who would like to make a public comment on the arts proposal? Just come forward, and while she's signing that, you can state your name and then sign before you're done.
Sure. My name is Kelly Yarbrough. Address is 2024 College View Road. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Kelly Yarbrough. I work locally with Prairie Wood Preserve. I am a visual artist with an MFA from K-State, and I am an arts administrator working with the Kansas Creative Arts Industries Commission and the Tallgrass Artist Residency. And I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts in regards to the proposal at hand for public art. I don't think I need to defend the concept of art and that it has value. But I think this is a good opportunity for us to consider how much we actually value the role of public art in our community. During 2020 and COVID-19 and the recovery process after that, I heard artists referred to as second responders, which I thought was interesting. But if we think about it, as we are coming out of this difficult time and things are reopening, what are we most anxious to get out and do? We want to go to restaurants, we want to have food, we want to see live music, theater, we want to go to festivals. We want to participate in arts and culture because that's what we thrive on as humans and as community members. I think also it's important to consider that public art has a special role. I like to advocate for arts in many different forms as a practitioner and as an arts professional, but I think public art gives us a special opportunity to showcase our communities. These aren't just projects of decoration or beautification, but public art can be an indicator of vitality and vibrancy in our community. It shows people that we care about quality of life for our citizens. You can't walk by a beautiful, compelling, well-maintained piece of public art and not think that this place is cared for. I think we've mentioned several recent public art projects that have come up in Manhattan, mural projects, the sculpture project. The Beach Museum has done the Inside Out project. And I've been able to participate in a number of committees, organizations that are thinking creatively about things that they can do to contribute to the arts community here in Manhattan. And I applaud all those efforts. I'm excited by those as an artist and a community member. But I also think that it would be wrong for us to put all the brunt of carrying the arts community on those individual organizations. What I see this proposal doing is offering us a way to build capacity and decide that the arts is truly something we want to invest in for the future. You know, it was mentioned that we've had kind of an ad hoc approach so far. And you know, I'm an artist. I'm all about being scrappy and creative when it comes to finding funding and implementation. But truly, I think that our arts program and arts policy needs a home. It needs consistency, it needs oversight with best practices. And I think this is an opportunity for us to consider investing in this. If we prioritize something, we will invest in it. In my role as an arts professional and administrator, I'm very fortunate that I get to see a lot of different arts initiatives and communities across the state of Kansas. The proposal that was shared earlier mentioned a number of examples from communities both inside the state and outside the state, but you really don't have to look beyond the state of Kansas to find some really compelling examples of communities that are working together to create really fabulous arts programs. And arts communities within their towns. And I would say even irrespective of size of the community, of geography, even in some cases irrespective of budget, but one common theme that I see rising to the top is cross-sector support. So support being funding, investment, and I would also say collaborative partnerships with programming. So when we think about this proposal at hand here, I think this is an opportunity for us to lend public support in a compelling way. And when I look around the audience here tonight, people that are listening at home, people that I think will support this proposal, I see all those as potential partners in this work as well. So I just want to offer that insight and encouragement. Thank you. I'll sign in.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would want to make public comment?
I'm going to scoot in next to you. Hi, Monica McFarlane from 213 Parker Drive. It's good to see you guys. I think that public art is actually something that is a quality of life issue. I do believe that it is important to establish policies because if you follow policies of best practice, that also demonstrates care for these resources. And it also provides an equitable process for all people who want to be part of that program. But I do have a couple questions about the position that would be created for the coordinator. One, I would be curious is what department they would fall under within the city. And then two, what duties would they absorb that free up resources? Because we've talked about how city manager's office, the city attorney's office, Parks and Rec, and risk management are all involved with dealing with the ad hoc system that we currently have. So if we're to put something in place that is a policy on how to deal with all this, what duties do they take on that kind of free up some of those resources in those offices and justify having a particular position for that? So those are just my kind of curiosities.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other public comments from anyone tonight? Okay, I guess Joe Knopp is gonna come up and speak.
While she's doing that, I'm Joe Knopp. I live most of my time at 620 Humboldt. Tonight I speak in favor of public art. Everybody likes public art. Public art is good. The devil is in the details. And the detail here is the $55,000 new position that you're seeking to adopt. It's incredibly insensitive of you to be considering this tonight when 1/3 of the community doesn't have a swimming pool. And you're saying that you can't support that swimming pool because you don't have staff. And yet you're coming here tonight and saying, well, yeah, we do. We got money for the staff. I've looked at the city budget, and the great thing about the city budget, I encourage everybody to look at, is it's very transparent. It's very easily understood. And so I look back in 2015, and there were 1,141 employees in the city of Manhattan. At that time, it had a population of 57,000 people. Today, according to your budget documents, in 2020, there are 1,218 city employees and a population of 55,000. In 2015, under 7%, 7 employees per 100,000 students, under 100,000 residents. Today, that number is 7.86 employees per 100,000. I challenge you to look at a zero-based budget and ask yourselves, out of the 47 pages in your budget that have the Parks and Rec budget and the budgets for community development, are there tasks, are there skill sets that are being currently utilized in those departments that could be reassigned to this? The problem that I have and you have is that anytime you speak against an education leader at the Sunset Zoo, that is a person. And there is somebody who has kind of used that service. If you talk about a marketing director at the Sunset Zoo or Discovery Center or any place else that might have similar skill sets as this person, now you're talking against a person, not a philosophical policy question. And so every time you add a position, that becomes a position that you have to fund from here on out, and you don't have the ability. That's the first question. The second question I want to adamantly talk against is any kind of development tax. If you don't have the discipline to make these decisions one by one by one, and you have to set aside money so that you have a slush fund to pay them out of, that is not leadership. And when you got a development tax, the guy who's building a subdivision northwest of Colbert Hills, is he going to pay for an art project that's downtown? Is he or she? I mean, what if you'd done this 40 years ago and had Dial Corporation when they built the mall? If you'd had, or not Dial, but when we built the mall, when Dial Corporation got all the subsidies it's got for building that, and you'd put that in there and said, okay, we're going to tax you an additional money for that, we'd be set. But now at this late date in the game, it seems to me to be extremely unfair. The people who benefit ought to pay the tax. And the people who benefit from public art are everybody. So they ought to come out of their sales tax dollars, they ought to come out of their property tax dollars. And if you want to allocate $100,000 a year out of the city budget for this, great. But be upfront about it and bring it out. I think that there's some real concerns here, and I think that you ought to, it's fine to have policies, and we need to have policies. Those policies are already in existence in Golden and Sina and every place else. It wouldn't take that much difficulty to refine them for what we want here. I know that the devil is in the details. We had artwork on the front steps of the municipal building here that was 2 monuments to the 10 Commandments. We took those down. I mean, I can just imagine the kinds of controversies you're going to have with people who come up with different kinds of artwork. I'd like to see some artwork for Goodnow and Wareham, and I like public figures who have contributed to the community. But somebody's going to find that they did something wrong in their past, and we're going to have a controversy as to whether or not we're going to honor these people who, by their faith and pursuit of freedom, founded Manhattan. So I see a lot of problems, but it's worth it. It's worth it to do it. But I'd encourage you to find some space in the 100 or 1,200 employees you have right now to create a new position, to carve out a position rather than create a new one. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment on the concept of a public arts program? Okay, seeing no one, we'll close the public comments portion and turn it over to the City Commission for your comments.
Well, I looked up and I see that Randy is the liaison to the Arts and Humanities Advisory Board, so I can understand that you probably don't have a lot of spare time to be taking on a lot of stuff. Based on the fact that there is a large contingent, whether it's the MHK Insight or other, for lack of a better term, volunteer arts organization, volunteer people out there, I would like us to not fund it next year and see how the first year goes. And if we find that, as Joe made the point, that if we have a person who's in charge of that, we're still going to need the city manager, still going to need the lawyer, the attorneys, city attorney. We're still going to need Parks and Rec and Public Works to weigh in on things So we're not solving the overall workload completely. If it would solve it, and the person had the authority to solve all those problems, then I would probably be more supportive. But and I don't know, if somebody's going to give you some artwork, you don't want to say, well, there's a $10,000 fee for donating your art to us so that we can provide the services to, make it happen, do the contracts, paperwork, insurance, whatever, things like that. But I wish we could make that work, but I don't think that's very, very likely. When it comes to all of the policies, I suppose you already, the city staff steals other city ordinances and policies from other places, and if you don't, well, then we need to get an intern to do that research and throw all that stuff together. I would hope that we could find some basic background material that would be sort of a boilerplate type of an approach to start with, and then fine tune it for what we need for Manhattan here. The whole idea of prioritizing this employee over the hiring freeze, we may or may not still, I assume we've kind of stopped it now. We just don't have people applying for the positions. But if we're not hiring Parks and Recreation plumbers and engineers because we don't have the money, then we sure don't have the money for this position. And I don't know if the marketing person from the zoo and the marketing person from the Discovery Center and the city's public affairs people, or whoever we've got, could help coordinate things a little bit. I'd like to see us try to do it in-house for the first year. Let's just end with that. Once we get a program going and people are excited and everybody's going, wow, this is cool public art, then we should definitely put a line item in the general fund, and once the public has seen the value of it, is endorsing it, wants more of it, then, like Joe said, we should tax everybody and make sure that it's a priority. I don't really like, I didn't completely understand the whole percent for art thing, but if it's capital improvement programs, that's just more money out of the city to help fund it in a different kind of way. I think we've got the money thing mostly figured out with the community foundation, so I don't want us to feel like we've got to generate a second funding source, because I think we have a pretty significant and fairly steady potential funding source there. So want more public art, like the fact that the Inside MHK people are doing a bunch of stuff on private property. Like to see that continued, and I would like maybe if it seems like the process of once we have a process, or in the meantime, if the public process seems to bog down so much that the artists are getting too frustrated, I would like some people to, if there's any people that own a business, I'm thinking along McCall Road or someplace like that, it might be a good time to ask some of those business owners around there and in some other high traffic areas, hey, would you be interested in having a piece of artwork on your private property? And just see what kind of response you might get. I would hope that there'd be, I'd be interested in Hilton Square having a piece of public art there that doesn't detract from driving and create sight visual things. I think our organization, our Square Condominium Association group would be interested in something like that, and I would bet there'd be a lot of places like that that would be able to bypass the whole brain damage of city, the city process of accepting art, developing art. And so I think a lot of this can still be done privately, and I would like to see us get some things in place, but I think that we should try it as a continuation of the ad hoc thing for a year, and then maybe we can put it in the budget for 2023 if it needs to be there at that time.
I was happy to see this as a discussion item. I pushed for it, but I'm not really that enthused about the presentation, to be blunt. And the reason is, my initial intent on this was, I realized that there was money in the Greater Manhattan Community Foundation, because Vern and I talked about it, and there wasn't a mechanism for the city to accept it. So as a result, we paid for a mural down at the Douglas Center that could have been funded by grant money, but instead it cost taxpayers $13,000. So that was my main goal. is let's figure out how to tap into this great resource and use that money to fund art. I didn't expect that to be out of alignment with everything else. And I use the term alignment because, everybody's got priorities in an organization, but the whole organization's got to be aligned. Now, we've had discussions about budget. What's the number one priority, budget or art? Well, for me, it's budget. I think everybody knows that. And so what you've got to do is always consider the budget. It doesn't make sense to me to hire another full-time person based on the budget situation we're in, with one exception, as you mentioned, on the position. What if it was endowed? Okay, that's alignment, because I'm looking at budget neutral basically. So I wanted to see the arts program be one that we utilize money from the Greater Manhattan Community Foundation and did the best we could with art without overloading the staff. And I know that's a challenge. Now, I saw a huge role for the Arts and Humanities Board in this. And I know when they were first formed, they had some frustration because they said, here we are, Arts and Humanities Board, we can't do anything. So we have no money, we have no capability. Well, once you solve the funding, now this board could be used to maybe handle a lot of that staff workload. I believe we have a model in that with the Special Alcohol Board and the Social Services Advisory Board, because they do a pretty good job of allocating funds. Now, I know there's some other hang-ups there. Katie did a good job of explaining about various liabilities and things like that, and I worked on the Johnny Cobb program, when we redid that, and I know that Parks and Rec had a lot involved in that, and there's some incidentals. But I want to see us try to craft this so it's a little bit more simplistic and maybe not as ambitious as this portrayal is right now. And like with Mark, maybe we go in this slow and figure out how to generate some funds, let the art board take the lead, minimize staff involvement. And I'm definitely against, again, to go back to alignment, we've been talking, next discussion item is the Manhattan Development Code, and we want to be business friendly. And then here we're talking about let's tack 1% on all development costs for art. It's not business friendly. If somebody's building a structure and they want to include art in it, great. Just like if you go to the Anthony Rec Center, you go upstairs on a running track, there's a real nice portrait there, and it's made out of little pictures. Excellent piece of art. Now that was included in it, that's as it should be, and we should encourage that. But the idea that we would do like they're doing in Boulder and say, okay, I think Ron mentioned this on the radio this morning, you do a water project, Public Works, another one of my issues, making certain that the water department keeps all their money. And now we're going to say when you put in a water line, 1% of the cost of that goes into a slush fund for art? I don't think so. That's not going to help us stay in alignment on driving down water bills. So it's a challenge to balance everything, and I guess I am challenging the staff to say, can you focus on the intent of basically, let's have an art program, let's have a policy, but let's do it in as most efficient as possible, which is, of course, the goal on organizational efficiency, which is one of the objectives, again, of the city, to put that in alignment. So I think we got about a 70% solution here, but the two things of that full-time position got to be addressed, and this 1%, possible slush fund, I think should just be totally eliminated. And I don't know if there's a capability to get this thing endowed, maybe a half-time position or something like that. And I know that would resolve the issues with Parks and Rec and all the time that you've got to spend on this. But that's where I'm at. I think let's dial this back a little bit and figure out how to get grant money, put it in the system, maximize use of the city board and the volunteers, and go forward from there.
Linda Morse, I had understood that the first thing we needed to do is develop a policy. And I'm interested in developing that policy and having that be our number one project here. And because I think the Community Foundation has drawn that line in the sand. And some of this depends on funding and of the art. We're just talking about how the city can deal with it internally. but I am anxious for what I would call a public art program. And I have admired the work that that Jeff Sackrider and I don't know the right name, site MHK has accomplished. They didn't ask, they just worked it out, and it just happened. And I don't think it was a big bureaucratic burden for the city. I don't know, I don't think so. So that's my priority. Not hiring somebody to develop the policy. I think that we're capable of developing a policy and then having some procedures and, to make that happen. I started out thinking that public art and policy is where we wanted to go. This has morphed into something much bigger, and the desire now is for a comprehensive art policy that we don't even know the boundaries for, and that's why I think we need to develop somehow our policy. I think endowing the program is great, but I see a bureaucracy, and that's what I'm sorry, but that's what I heard tonight, is all of this bureaucratic kind of, that keeps us from doing anything. We've been talking about a public art policy for the last year and a half, and I don't think I support a capital improvement part, because we can't even get capital improvements with our budget. Everything's taken up with concrete, and and the arts are the first thing to go, whether it's in the local schools. It'll be the first thing to go when there are budget cuts in the city. And so I don't expect art in the capital improvements program to survive on a year-to-year basis. There are just so many people that don't value art. There are constant critics about some of the art projects we have in this community. It's not everybody working together. There are these naysayers, I guess. I just think it'd be hard to avoid program cuts. I agree we need a framework, and that comes with the policy, or from the policy we develop the framework rather than developing the framework first. And I know, I can tell there are a lot of moving parts, but I've just seen what I think is the staff really holding back and saying, nope, we're not going to do this until we get till we get the resources. I was amazed at the kind of support that the Johnny Caw statue had from the city, this level of support. I don't even know how much that project, cost in city staff time, and so I think it was bigger than I might know. There's a possibility of eking out some economic development money too. And if this is going to be I'm very cautious. I have been all along about economic development money and how we spend it. I've wanted to maximize it. But I don't know where, but I'm not interested in just funding a position. And I anticipated using that same argument about the positions at the pool, that we can't fund the third pool here in this community. And that is a big disappointment for me, that this community spoke, and they said, we want 3 pools, and we built them, and now we can't afford to operate, or we can't find the employees. We have to put enough energy into making it happen. So that's probably convoluted, but that's where I'm at, Dennis.
Okay, so Commissioner Reddy, we don't want to forget, you're out there online, feel free.
Sure, thank you. I think it's a good discussion. I'm sure Commissioner Estabrook might also have comments. I think, we have been talking about having a public art policy for quite a while. When I first came on the city commission in 2013, the big discussion that was happening at that time was, I think it was a cost statue on the roundabout of Bluemont. And I remember calling several Native American communities, Indian communities, to figure out what they wanted. I know Jason was working heavily on that project, all of the models we saw, and I know how much staff time that statue alone took. And it seems like it's simple, but it's quite daunting among everything else that's going on. And then the next piece was with the most recent, I remember, are those 10 statues or this 10 art pieces of work we wanted to put in the city, and how much we had to work with the downtown businesses, wondering whether we should put it downtown or in Aggieville or at City Park or where we wanted to put it. The other piece that I remember having a big conversation was when I was on the library board, and there was this big art piece they wanted to put. It looked like a stack of books, but it was too heavy. It was there was a lot too much to it, and I don't know whatever happened to that. But we spent months on that discussion as well, and nothing came of it because there was so much involved in it. So when I look at this, we think some of these things are easy. I think right now, because of the Greater Manhattan Community Foundation and the funds that they have, the funding piece is taken care of for pieces of art. I think we have a good advisory board in the Manhattan Arts and Humanities who will review the process and pick out art and help put out the RFPs and such. So we have a selection process for art pieces, and we have some funding source for art pieces. And because we are talking about public space and where these pieces are going to go, it's going to be extremely important to the city as far as what type of art, as well the liability issue and the insurance. And that's what took up a lot of time when we were looking at those 10 pieces, and probably the next 10 that are coming up, because we have now reviewed that process a little bit more. But I think the murals that we see are not hanging murals or stand-up murals. They're just murals on a wall, which might be a little bit easier to do. But when we're talking about statues and pieces of art that can fall if there's a tornado or a flooding, whatever might happen, who takes responsibility for all of that? I am an advocate for public art, and I think when we went and saw all of these pieces in other areas, we are a vibrant community. I know there might be a discussion about donors when we talk about the Beach Museum, the Manhattan Arts Center, the Flint Hills Discovery Center, and now even the Art and Light Museum, about donors and funds and art. We have donors who want to donate art. We have donors who want to donate money. We have an interest. So I think that's there if we want to go with an endowed position of some kind. But I do believe this requires a staff person, if not now, at least in the future. I think this community can't just piecemeal things and put things together. We are a great community, but we are not very appealing to the eye. We just have boxes of buildings, and we don't have much that makes it more welcoming and inviting and adds more than what we are, because we are stuck in that process. And if we have a dedicated person to this, I think we would have a more robust community as far as art is concerned. So if not now, at least in the future, I do believe this is a priority, and it has been a priority for a while. But I've seen how hard our staff works on just those three or four examples I gave you. It absorbs a lot of time that we don't even see. And if there's one dedicated person that puts their efforts into this and can be the liaison that brings all of that together, it might be make it more comprehensive and more understandable for people who want to put art in our community. So that's my take on it. As far as the percentage of dedicated something for capital funds, I think I could be wrong, but my understanding is over the years, the public and other organizations have presented so many types of proposals, and this was suggested, I forgot by which organization, that maybe we should dedicate a certain percentage of funds to this. And I think that's what maybe staff put into it. But I too am not in favor of doing that. I think there are some dedicated sources to go to for funding for art pieces right now. So I hope I've answered the questions that are for discussion this evening.
Okay, thank you, Aaron.
All right. So I have lots of thoughts, I guess. I think in my position, I've had the opportunity to sit and listen to a lot of different perspectives around art. I've never heard art described as having the opportunity to have a slush fund, so that was interesting. But from a perspective of the school district or the school board, it's always about arts getting cut. There's always something that's being lost to art. So this was interesting. At the same time, we're having this discussion and this conversation about what I guess is a staff position, as everyone else seems to agree that art's important. Do we create a staff position or not? We did pass a consent item that was $47 million for art, and we're stuck on a $55,000 plus benefits argument. But I also hear this often from our commissioners, from our mayor, from people in the community, that there isn't a distinction, or there needs to be a distinction made between how the city is discussed in our ability to pay people what they're worth and hiring qualified people, like in the case of the pools. That's different than being able to afford to hire a person. It's not that the money doesn't exist. Those are different arguments. It gets conflated into the budget discussion and the priorities, but holding this up because the pool isn't open has really no dots connecting it. It's totally separate conversations about the hiring, and I just want to lay that out there, that hiring qualified people and paying them what they're worth, that's a discussion that we need to have that might cause some budget concerns and might be more than what we paid them last year or have more than 1,200 people. But that's not the same as being able to hire somebody, I guess, because we're not paying people, in my opinion, what they're worth currently. So that being said, yes, I don't want to micromanage the hiring process. I think if the city manager needs to work with the Greater Manhattan Community Foundation, the Deal Foundation, the Arts and Humanities Advisory Board, my understanding is we should be talking about the policy. The policy was done months ago. Why aren't we talking about the policy? Why are we talking about a position that our city manager is qualified to, I think, hire, I think, find the funds to do? If necessary, it doesn't come off the tax rolls. So what's the problem? Why are we waiting? Let's move forward. I don't know if you need me to vote for a position to move forward. That seems a little silly, but please move forward quickly. Arts in our community are important. We just passed allowed consent for a $47 million project around arts. We've heard everybody talk about the Beach Museum, Flint Hills Discovery Center. Arts is becoming a very important part in our community. This doesn't seem to be hitting the core issues of what the holdup is, but move forward, whatever it takes.
One more thing. Yeah, I think you kind of, the whole idea of we've now are talking about a comprehensive arts policy. Could we get a donated art policy, a 2-page ordinance thing that would allow us to start accepting art that's been funded externally from the city? If we could get that part of the policy presented to us and passed, and then over the next couple of years we can figure out all of the other possible fingerling ramifications that lawyers come up with that need to be addressed, then we can kind of address that perhaps at that time. But I would like us to see about getting the most basic, simple, we can now accept public art that's funded privately. Can we get that fairly quickly, and then we'll solve all these other issues over the next year or two and come up with a comprehensive plan once we see, but I'd like to see us get something in place fairly quickly.
Okay, good discussion. I took, like 4 notes, try to sum this up, because I know city staff's trying to figure out which way to go. And what I've heard here basically is that a solid majority of the commission, at least 4, are not really interested in having a percentage of various developmental projects go into an art fund,
So, if I could, just respond to that. So, we didn't provide you a lot of information on a percent for art. We just wanted to raise it as a possibility. In most places, it's not a development fee. The commission, whoever has it, it's a specific policy that says these type of public improvements that lend themselves to having art projects can charge a percent for art included in their overall budget. And that can be very discretionary, but at least it's a policy. It doesn't say you're gonna have a fee on every infrastructure or improvement item. So I just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah, that makes sense, but I think pretty much that's out of alignment with the MDC thing. So I think, what I heard was we're not really interested in doing that. The full-time position's interesting. He's got about a 3-2 split there, I think, on what to do there. I think everybody would agree if we could get it endowed, that would be good. Or if there's some way to finance it where it's not gonna have a major budget impact, that would be good too. But it seems universal that what we really would like is, and I know this is a challenge for Dennis, is to maybe slim this down and just try to make a dent in it and figure out how to get money from the Greater Manhattan Community Foundation into some account that can be managed by the Arts Board. And let's take a couple of small steps before we jump all the way to the top. It's like, just a couple small steps to get there. And that's what I heard from the group. I think did a good job, laying out what it is, and it is pretty challenging. But I think that's where we are at this point. Do you need anything else?
So I just clarification from what I heard. Basically, what I heard was essentially you want us to continue our ad hoc policy, but you want a policy that's gonna invite everybody to donate art. So that isn't just the Manhattan Community Foundation, it's anybody that wants to donate art, because now you have a policy. Because before, what we've operated on is, well, somebody comes forward and makes a proposal for a project. And so therein lies the dilemma. Once we create the policy and we establish it either by a resolution or ordinance as part of your policy resolution, everybody knows that they can come forward, which will just put more burden potentially on the staff. Maybe we're wrong, maybe there won't be. Maybe all we'll get is the art that we're seeking. So it's just one of those things where we'll continue, I guess, to spread it out to whoever has time to work on it. And we work, instead of having a coordinator, we'll all gather in a conference room and who's got time to do this? Okay, you do that part of it, you do that part of it, you do that part of it. And other things will be delayed because of that. So if that's what you want us to do, that's what we'll do.
But isn't it possible to just create a policy that focuses on the Greater Manhattan Community Foundation? And that's what my intent was. Does it have to be? I know legal is gonna tell me no. Okay.
If you would like to accept funds just from one organization, as Ron said, we can do that without a policy on an ad hoc basis as we have in the past. If we adopt a policy, we can't discriminate among the people who have an opportunity to pursue that process under the policy.
Okay, well then, I understand we couldn't accept that money because we didn't have a policy, so can we call it something else, a procedure?
So from a legal perspective, we do not have to have a policy to accept that money, or from a city practical perspective. That was a request of our funding entity, the foundation, who would like to see the policy in order to have a consistent and predictable approach to their funding source that will be on an annual basis. So the policy is not a city-driven, it's not city-driven priority. It is because we now have a funding source that understandably would like to see a policy in place so that there's a level of predictability, consistency to their funding process. So I hope that makes sense, but it's not the city saying we have to have a policy in order to do this. But you can understand why a funding entity would like the recipient to have a policy in order to provide that benefit to the community.
Okay, I understand that. Well, I hope then if we have to go that way, then we should go that way. I don't think we're gonna be overwhelmed by a lot of people coming out of the woodworking, wanna giving us piles of money, so.
Well, and I guess the question becomes is, any proposal would go through the Arts and Humanities Board, and everything that goes on public land, the city commission would sign off on, or not? What is what is your understanding of that? Yes, right? So,
Yes.
exactly, okay, and so I guess, so every 2 years, the policy could change slightly if it's always based on what the commission wants and such, but I guess my question is, I don't know if the Greater Manhattan Community Foundation was planning on giving the city money to do stuff, or they were just going to fund projects that then might go to the city. Which one is it? Could Vern come up for a second, or Dennis, could you paraphrase what the intent of the foundation actually is?
My understanding through the conversation is kind of all the above. There may be opportunities where they want to give us money and we commission the artwork. There may be actual things that they would like to put on public land. So that is, I think, part of the impetus for their request is they have lots of, if you're talking about roughly maybe $150,000 a year, that's a lot of volume coming at us. And we are very much envisioning, we could have 4 or 5 requests a year just from the foundation. Then you add on top of that other organizations within the community that could also be coming at us with their donated art, or individual artists within the community say, hey, I've created this, I would like to see if we can put that in a right of way. But for specifically to the community foundation, is it's kind of all the above. So that's kind of where do we have the policy to have a donated art? Do we have a policy for commissioned art, policy for juried art? Because all those kind of do have different processes. But yes, we would involve community organizations, advisory boards, and then bring them back to you as commission. And so when you say develop a policy, our caution to you is that the implementation is the more crux of the issue. Yes, we can write a 2-page policy, we can borrow from other organizations or local governments. The issue is, are we going to frustrate the donors when we have a request for 6 projects a year and we don't have the staff resources to do that? And so that's our caution.
Yeah, and that seems like just so much bureaucratic red tape that it should be easier for somebody to make a proposal to the Arts and Humanities Board. They investigate it over a couple of meetings, give it the thumbs up, comes to the city commission, and we go, sounds good, and the thing's in place in 4 to 6 months. And I think government should be more simplistic, but I guess it can't be. And so that's between ordinances and the state and the feds and lawyers and people who want to do good for somebody else's behalf or something. Everybody, the whole thing gets so confusing and mucked up and a lot more complicated than it needs to.
You also want to maintain the artistic integrity, meaning if you have certain artworks that do need maintenance, what do you do to decommission them? What's the value of them? What's the contract? So it's also about the artist's integrity and how we work with artists. So,
yeah.
But I would think, the policy would cover the full cost. Like if somebody wanted to donate artwork and it's going to require additional cost on the city part, that's got to be part of the donation.
And that was one
of the Arts Board could make that clear. Say, if I'm an artist and I want to donate a statue and it's going to cost the city X amount to put on public property, then I got to donate that too, to make it happen.
And there was recognition about that in terms of, say, you have a vandalized art piece. Is the city going to utilize city funds to do that, or do we need to go back to the donor or whatever? And
I would think, again, you want to make it revenue neutral. So if I'm going to build a statue, give it to the city, I'm going to have to pay for the installation of it and buy insurance for it, because it needs to be revenue neutral. That's my point. And I think it's possible to make that happen. I really do.
And so we're just saying to you tonight is that we understand your desire for a policy. We just want to make sure that if we go forward with that, we could frustrate your ultimate goal with having the ad hoc approach. And I think what we've heard from the last 2 years is the ad hoc approach has frustrated this community. And so trying to see a way that we can address that, this was one of the solutions that we came up with.
Well, it may have to be a little bit ad hoc. I think some of that was successful in the past, so but hopefully that gives you some way to go, Ron. I know we haven't reached a real agreement here, but I think we beat it to death at this point. Should we take a 5-minute break, maybe? Well, let's do that. Take a 5-minute break or so until 5 till 9, and then we'll talk about the Manhattan Development Code. Thank you. Okay, I think we've finished our break. We'll move on to the last discussion item for this evening, which is the Manhattan Developmental Code, Articles 26.8, Procedures and Administration, and 26.9, Land Development and Review Discussions. And old John Adam, our Senior Long Range Planner, is going to take this one on for us tonight.
John, you don't have that section in here about charging a development fee, do you? That's good.
Well, you know, when you switch screens in Zoom, sometimes you don't, it doesn't share it correctly.
Yeah, I just was.
There we go.
Which one are you? This one?
Yep. There we go. Okay, great. That looks right.
I think you can do
Yeah,
this.
I was going to do that. Thank you. Okay. Good evening, John Adams, Senior Planner. I'm going to be going over the various divisions of Articles 26.8 and 26.9 tonight, and then try to answer your questions on the material. So 26.8A largely serves to illuminate who the decision-making and advisory bodies are in the development process. It also contains the establishment language for the zoning administrator and the Board of Zoning Appeals. Those are currently housed in the zoning regulations today, and once those are supplanted, they have to be housed somewhere. Division 26B, 8B, really acts as kind of an upfront guide for applicants and the public. It lays out the procedural steps for applications and what the different types of land use actions are. So we decided to categorize the types according to the decision makers and the level of public involvement. The first two types are administrative, and they come under the approval authority of the zoning administrator. Type 1 is purely a staff decision involving straightforward application of code standards. Type 2 involves notice to properties within 200 feet of the subject area to allow them to comment on the application or the proposal. Type 3 are those matters that are decided by the Planning Board, the Board of Zoning Appeals, or the Historic Resources Board in a public hearing. Type 4 decisions are made by the City Commission and that are enacted by ordinance. And then consent is a companion step to some Type 3 processes. The next few sections in this division lay out the sequential process that is seen from the applicant's and the public's side of things. It begins with the pre-application meeting, where staff can advise the applicant on modifications that they should make to their proposal and what steps to anticipate in the review process. Then come the procedures for arranging and conducting neighborhood meetings and what the purpose of neighborhood meetings is. Then the application itself. There's a kind of a detour that happens at this point between application and hearing, the work that happens mostly among staff, which I will describe in the next division of this article. During the time between application and hearing, the notices are produced and sent out if notice is a requirement. And then the hearing happens and a decision is made. So the next division covers the application review steps that staff undertakes. Following the submission of the application, staff begins its completeness review. That's a 15-day period in which it can determine if the application is complete and sufficient. If it is found lacking, the applicant is given a period of time to submit corrections or supplements. Once deemed complete, CD staff gets the ball rolling by soliciting memoranda from other departments in the referral process. As those comments start rolling in, staff begins drafting a report on the application. Does the proposal meet the criteria for approval or not? Are there corrections that will ensure a better project through the addition of conditions of approval? That takes us out of the internal steps and back into the public side that I described in the previous section. Concluding with a notice of decision to the applicant detailing the result, the finding, and conditions, if any. And Division 8D contains some post-approval housekeeping items. The remaining divisions in this article have to do with nonconformities and enforcement of this chapter. I will not be covering nonconformities tonight. Mr. Bunger will be covering that at I believe, the July 6th meeting. Enforcement is a standard administrative section of any development code. It concerns how to deal with violations of the code. Violations include developing without a land use permit or approval, establishing land uses that are inconsistent with this chapter, developing contrary to conditions of approval, creating non-conforming yards or setbacks, increasing the intensity of a use in a non-conforming fashion, and selling lots without an approved plat of subdivision. And then the rest of the division describes enforcement steps, including notice to the responsible party and working with them toward compliance. Article 26.9 then starts off with a list, and I'm moving on to this next section. This is land development review. This is really where the rubber hits the road, or meets the road, and we go through those processes and the review factors. So this lists all the actions, their procedure types, and gives you a guide to where they are found within this article. Excuse me. The first few divisions follow a roughly sequential process. So beginning here in 26.9B with growth management, that's annexation of land, and then rezoning of land to different types. 26.9C concerns land division. It is directly tied to 26.5, Article 26.5. That contains the design standards for subdivisions, including streets, stormwater, easements, so forth. And the next division has the criteria and processes for site development of various stripes, from master plan development to signs to building permits. 26.9E is adjustment. Board of Zoning Appeal is mostly in charge of that one. These come into play when the zoning regulations are just too tight a fit. Say that someone wants to add on to their house, but the property line is here and the minimum setback line is there. They've got a problem, but that's why there are relief valves that are built into development codes. If someone wants a modification or a change from some dimensional standards, then there's a way for them to try to get those allowances by appealing to the BZA. 26.9F has the appeals procedures and authorizations for items that are directly governed by the development code. Building permits, for example, are not covered. They're authorized by the building code, and so they would be subject to whatever review processes or appeals are available in that route. And then 26.9G governs establishment of and amendments to the districts and amendments to the code and the comprehensive plan. All right, so that was just like an overview of the overall structure of Article 9. I'd like to back up just a little bit, and I'd like to cover Division 29 or 9D and talk in particular about two new processes that are taking the place of planned unit developments in a little more detail. The first one is residential master plan development. It's one of the three types of subdivision that are introduced in the new development code, the others being standard and the other cluster. Instead of the uniformity of a standard subdivision, the MPD type has the variety built into it. The MPD type occupies the middle ground between base zoning district and the developer-defined planned development floating zone. It's designed to allow for a broader range of building types, densities, and some non-residential uses in a largely residential setting. In exchange for those flexibilities, minimum open space and minimum residential densities are standard requirements. Applying the MP type is a rezoning action that receives a recommendation from the Planning Board and approval by the City Commission. The only significant additional requirement for this type of zoning or this kind of rezoning is the submittal and approval of a development map, like this example, showing the mix of uses, densities, open space, and an expected phasing plan. The other new process is a modified version of the PUD. It's the planned development floating zone. The process starts off similar to the PUD with a rezoning question looking at the uses, densities, bulk standards, plus a basic circulation plan. Planning Board reviews it and makes a recommendation to the Commission, which then adopts the new zoning by ordinance, like a PUD today. After that, it becomes much more like a subdivision process. The applicant has to develop in accordance with the zoning standards that they wanted and that they got their approvals for. The planning board then reviews and approves it, this detailed development plan, if it is found to be in conformity with the adopted PD floating zone. And it's at this step that the finer details like architecture are finalized and made part of the final development plan. All subsequent building permits thereafter have to follow this plan. And that was the basic overview on that, and I'd be happy to take questions now, concerns from you. Just as a reminder, again, you have 2 more meetings on this. Next one is going to be conformities and definitions, and then we'll have a wrap-up and show you some of the new application forms that we're anticipating having out there. We hope to have your major concerns in our hands by, what was July 13th on that. And anything that you give us tonight, I will be making notes of that as well.
I don't have any major concerns or questions on this topic other than what I've just conveyed to Mr. Bunger about the definitions around things and family and the overlays and that discussion. So I'm sure that's on his radar, just pointing that out.
Yeah, we've been talking internally.
When we saw this in the beginning, there were no definitions, and we were told that the definitions would come later. So we're still waiting for some of these definitions, right?
The definitions are all in place.
Are they
Have you
now?
gone? Yes.
They weren't in the okay, when we saw it early on.
Yeah, so the viewer, the code viewer
Yeah.
that's hosted by Encode, so you'll see some that have kind of a yellow glow if you
Right.
float over them. Not everything's defined, of course. There are common terms that we don't define. But when you see those, you should be able to hover over them, and you'll get a pop-up.
I haven't
there.
checked back once I knew they weren't there. I just
Ah.
decided, well, they'll tell us when they've got them all updated, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're there now?
They are there,
All the
yes.
definitions,
Mhm.
okay. I wanted to ask about what kind of input the community has had into these, like the neighborhood associations, representatives, or I'm certain that you've been to the developers
Mhm.
about these, but who else in the community have you talked to about these?
Well, in the early days of the project, we had a fairly robust public outreach process that we were pursuing, going to various groups, pushing it out there through other electronic means to get people's attention. We formed an ordinance advisory committee early on. That committee comprises developers, real estate interests, people from the chamber, architects, engineers, a lot of engineers on that, because we were very concerned that we wanted to make sure that we integrated the subdivision regulations very well with the zoning regulations.
Right.
And we were able to resume having our OAC meetings, the advisory committee meetings, and we had a really robust discussion just a couple of weeks ago with them in this room. Chad Bunger is doing a lot of the outreach now. He's undertaking that, going to various groups, Rotary and such, and speaking to them and rolling this out there. Real estate organization and that. And we also are recording videos going section by section and have that posted on our outreach website.
I'm certain you have reached out to all the professionals. That's not my question. It's what about the ordinary citizens? We won't know until those citizens rise up with some objection at some point. Once we totally change this, and that's what we're doing. We're totally changing our guidelines.
After we've wrapped up our presentations to the planning board and to you, we are going to be going to a much more public, the man on the street sort of thing. By proxy, we have also been taking it to our board of the Bike Ped Advisory Committee, to the various committees that aren't really in the decision-making process, but are advisory to the city, using them as, like I said, proxy for the citizenry. including Historic Resources Board. We went over very extensively because we're doing a lot of changes in what today is the TNO, the Traditional Neighborhood Overlay. We undertook a big process, and you know, actually, I just realized I presented this to you about a month and a half or so ago, to try and make it really, really work now as an overlay zone for the built environment there. So we've been getting positive feedback on that. It doesn't change the intensities or densities of uses, and I know those are major concerns when we're talking about the TNO, because people fought hard for downzonings. But that's not been touched. We're just trying to make it a better fit. So yeah, we're expecting to hear more from the public.
Okay, because at
Commi-
this point, we
Commissioner, this
really
is Eric.
haven't had much input.
Part of the problem, and I don't want to say it's all the pandemic, but during the past year with the pandemic, we couldn't go out to the public in person meetings. So we've been doing the videos that are almost complete, and they'll be on that EngageMHK.org website. But now that things are more opening up, we are going out and having more in-person meetings, and we'll be approaching the different neighborhood groups and that as well. It's just, we couldn't do it during the pandemic in an effective way, so.
Okay. Because I really do want to hear that the public is engaged. This is huge. Okay. I do have some, so you have actually taken those aspects that are about historic designation. You've been to the Historic Resources Board for that. And what are some other boards, I don't know, that have an interest beside Planning Board?
Well, Board of Zoning Appeals, and we're going to be going to Parks and Recreation. I mean, they have some interest, of course, in this. And there's a lot of correspondence, so we work with them closely because quite often during the development, a park opportunity emerges.
And how have the discussions been going with the county? Because in that extended area around the city, for a mile around the city, we work with them to adopt the same thing, and I think you've been talking to the county about those. How are those discussions going?
Yes, that's gone very well. I mean, they've seen, what they're adopting will be the subdivision regulations.
Right.
Because that's the only jurisdictional correspondence in the Manhattan urban area or planning area. So they will be adopting those, and there's a few niceties of how do we slot that into our code from their perspective. That they are looking at and thinking about.
And John, there's also the 2 corridor overlays that we created conceptually about 10 years ago with Riley County and Ogden, actually, for the K-18 corridor and the Gateway, the 177 corridor. The county is adopting a very similar, almost word-for-word version in the county regulations that we'll have. So the concept was that Riley County might actually apply those overlay zones to those corridors outside the city so that they're in place. And then there's the underlying county zoning. As land gets annexed into the city, the underlying zoning would change, but the overlay is similar in both the cities and the counties.
And their
zoning regulations.
At the time, they were not willing to accept the city's comprehensive look. And so that, you know, I was on the Gateway Planning Committee. Those must be 15 years ago now.
Originally.
So that's what I mean. I know they rejected it then, they adopted one simple little paragraph per topic that, you know, could drive a truck through. So I just wondered about how this is going.
It's going well. Like John and I said, they have adopted or they're in the process of doing their own MDZ, so to speak. And those 2 corridors will have similar overlay district language in their regulations as the same as ours. So as things get annexed in those 2 corridors, the overlays will be very similar.
That would be wonderful, because we have some things that have happened over those 15 years. That all that equipment on the 177 as you approach town, and, you know, some things that just are kind of ugly. They may be a good business, but they aren't beautification for as you enter the city. Thank you, I appreciate, I just wanted your reaction to how that goes.
Two quick things. One, I've noticed over the evolution of this rollout, everybody, I think, has slowly stopped saying UDO. And you guys have learned the acronym of the Manhattan Development Code, and we have too. The other thing is the videos are good, and I get the texts, and that's an indication of how boring my life is that people text me that the Manhattan Development Code videos are awesome. So thank you. Keep up that good work. It's getting information out there to people.
Yeah, you've probably seen mostly Ben Schmiel's videos.
He's the funny guy.
Yes.
So is there any chance that there's more than 200 people are going to be affected by these changes?
On a daily basis, not in a sense, not in that same sort of sense.
The developers or care, the people that want to remodel their house and do something different are going to care, but the vast majority of people, they're not going to be affected by any of these things.
I think we're going to be putting a little bit of relief built in now, that the Board of Zoning Appeals, they might see a lessened load because of that.
Good.
They're certainly going to see a lessened load down here in the wards.
Good. Then it'll be worth it then. So.
Yes.
I do have a concern about, on page, I'm just saying, 351, which is a variance for a floodplain regulation, and turning that over to the Board of Zoning Appeals for exceptions. Is that,
That's,
I mean, in the past, you have enforced, the FEMA regulations and, instead of a board making an exception to some whining person, because they have a good story. I don't know.
I'm a little.
Talk to me about that.
Okay. I'm a little ill-equipped to talk about that because it was the provenance of Chad Bunger for such a long time that I didn't, I let him take care of it. My understanding was that whatever processes had to do with floodplain management today basically just kind of got broken up and put in almost indistinguishably into the new code from what they exist as today. One, because these processes are largely dictated by FEMA. And so we have very little say in how these things are written. But I could make a particular note of that and have
That's
Chad
my
answer that
concern
question.
about the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Sure.
Overruling some, I don't know what it could be, and it may be so minor it won't matter, but we are talking about regulating floodways and floodplains, and that would be a cause for concern.
Yeah, I want to agree with Commissioner Morris on that. I'm all for, and I've said it many times over the years, draconian floodplain regulations. And we don't need the Board of Zoning Appeals to, overturn that or make exceptions because, we've talked enough about flooding over the years. It started, when I first got on the commission in 2011, and we don't want to contribute to it.
Sure.
So that's a big one. The other thing is Commissioner Reddy, are you still there? You may want to comment. I don't see you up there.
Oh, I'm here. Can you see
Okay,
me?
if you want to comment, go ahead and do so. We've got you back on the screen.
Thank you. Yes, I don't have too many comments, but I am looking forward to the non-conforming piece of this. So I think that discussion should be allotted a lot of time because that's where we were stuck for many years with several of the areas we were looking at in the city of Manhattan. So I'm looking forward to that discussion. I think that's going to be very impactful. As far as the public comment and public meetings and notice, I think it's good to talk to some of the neighborhood people, give them a call in some of these neighborhoods and see what they think. Just an individual or two, I'm not saying an entire neighborhood. People that are often impacted in some of these areas that are being developed more often, especially on the west side. What is a good amount of time? Because what I don't want a developer or others to do is just check off that box. Yeah, we had the meeting, nobody came out, good, we're good to go. Instead of, what is an appropriate time? What does that look like? And I don't know how you gathered the data or the information for the amount of time or the days that's necessary for that. But that's something that I think requires some attention. We've had neighborhood residents in the past saying, I didn't know this was going on in my neighborhood. I would have talked about it earlier. So I don't know where that's dropping them, why they're not getting that information. Could be a variety of reasons. I also think, just gather maybe 5 or 6 people, and if we can take them into the tech room at the library and just give them a question, if they're renovating, even if it's a renovation question, give them a question so that to see how easy it is to navigate the website. I think one of the things we wanted to do is make sure people understand how to use the website and make it easier for them, not just for the developers, but for others who just want to see how something, if they want to extend or add on or, do something different, just to see if it's easy to find those definitions for those words as you use your cursor, to get their input, because maybe that's where we get more information as regular residents. It may not be important in the next day or two or the next week or the next year, but oftentimes people who want to think about renovations think about it 10, 20 years down the road. So I highly suggest, even just for city staff, get 5 of them in a room and see if they can navigate a site, give them a question and see if they can find it on the site. And that would probably give information as to just how easy this is or where the tweaks might need to be made. So those are just a couple of recommendations. Otherwise, I think the changes that have been made seem adequate. I think looking at it at a comprehensive picture, hopefully developers also find it easy to use. And one of the other goals to this was absolutely what the other commissioners were saying, to reduce people going to the Board of Appeals. We want to reduce that, because if they're going there, that means something didn't work in the codes that we had, and reduce the amount of work they get so there aren't too many exceptions to the rule. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mark?
I do have a clarification about the floodplain variance process. So in the table of land use actions, that's on page 316. I don't know if our numbers exactly match up, but a floodplain variance, the review authority is a floodplain administrator. So that's still the same. It's not going to the Board of Zoning Appeals. It's in the appeals, it's in the adjustment section, just because that's the catch-all section or division for adjustments. It's not solely the provenance of the BZA. We agree.
And Chad and Samantha are both certified floodplain managers, and they do all that floodplain approval and review of elevation certificates and all the FEMA and NFIP requirements. So.
Well, I'm going to read it over more carefully. On 351, what they can make exceptions or variances, whatever it is for. Thank you. I appreciate your explanation.
Okay, I think this has been an excellent, process. I think the website's great. The videos are fantastic. I think that, a lot of the population, if they're interested in this, is going to have to take the time to go to the website and click around a little bit and find the things they're concerned about, and hopefully provide some feedback, to the commission and the staff, so that we can integrate that. And this is probably the most user-friendly one that I've seen, and that's something you should all be proud of, because it's tough to put together a user-friendly document of that particular size. And then my last comment is, you mentioned July 13th, and I mentioned this to the commission before, is if each of the commissioners could just make your list of the particular things, because I see that last meeting as maybe being sort of like we run meetings. The stuff we're not concerned about is like consent agenda, so we don't need to talk about that. But each one of us may have a handful of things. I think my list is about 6 items that I need some clarification on. And of course, if you could get those in advance, with the notes and concerns, just like our discussion tonight on Board of Zoning Appeals, then maybe we won't have a 10-hour meeting to get through the
That's
MDC,
our-
and that's what the intent is.
And that's our desire as well, that when, you know, we're still anticipating that formal adoption has to go through the planning board and city commission. That's probably around September, October. So between July and end of August, when we actually publish the final public hearing document, we want to have all those issues worked out, so you don't have a 13-hour meeting.
Yeah, so what would be the mechanism? Just have each of us send that to Ron? Would that work?
Yeah, I think so, but we've got 2 more presentations left.
Right.
So as we do that, it wouldn't hurt to have some of those comments
In advance?
in advance.
Okay, I can do that. I'll send you what I have and then do a final one, update on July 13th. And then maybe if it can be shared in the mail folders, then we'll all be aware of where our issues are, and we can streamline what takes place during that meeting. So I appreciate all the hard work on this, and I'm sure Chad will have fun, because the conformities piece is going to be the interesting one coming up
Yeah,
here
that's
in the
the
future.
next meeting.
Tell him that's what happens when he goes on vacation.
That's right. That's it. So, do we have any other comments? Are we good to go here? All right, that's the end of the meeting, so let's adjourn. Thanks for everybody that tuned in, and have a good evening. We're adjourned.
I broke the microphone. It won't turn off.
Commissioner Reddy's microphone.
It won't turn off. Jared, we broke the microphone. It won't even turn off.